I heard this book before I began writing it. I was always very sensitive to the atmospheres outside, the weather, the sound of the wind, or earlier still, my parents' voices, their accents. And then as I had children, my children's voices and the sounds of nature all around us. So it's such a delight to work with you, to work with Spiracle, because sound is so important to the way that I immerse myself as well as the readers in the sense of place and how place is important, and also migration. And it's trying to work through both of those themes of place and migration through how we experience the world around us and those noises, anything from the wind or birds and the trees outside to the hustle bustle streets in Hayes and West Ealing where I grew up. So I think it's such an interesting endeavour recording it like this, because I'm experiencing everything and all those senses around me as we try to collect all those histories and that sense of heritage and time and place. And I try to do that through this experience of memory and almost like little home movies. So of course I'm thinking about all those sounds too, and we try to bring them forward through this representation of my family.
But tell us, because I think this is also interesting, something that you've been just kind of alluding to as we've been recording, is how you write, because it's not like you're sitting there thinking, okay, I'm going to sort of set out on my next chapter or this, it's almost like there's this quite sound, this, this speaking, this talking going on that you just then kind of seem to just put down on the page, I mean, describe that, because it is quite oral. It's not, I mean, I know this is a text, and I know you've sort of been surprised yourself by the difficulty in some ways of making that text work as a sort of something in the air, speaking it. But say a bit about that.
So I grew up hearing all these different accents and dialects and voices, and I do talk a little bit about it in the book, where I remember recording my family's voices and listening back and being quite surprised and being quite entranced by these sounds that I was thinking about in the first time as very different and very objectified. So that experience of trying to navigate that sound and the sound that's specific to the dialects and the accents I grew up with is really important. And it's not necessarily about the accuracy, but actually the inaccuracy, because there were so many conflicts going on with the way I was listening to words or sounds as I grew up, in addition to how I was receiving the world around me. So I was just thinking about all these different voices. And as we did here, we were kind of performing those voices as well. I was trying to imagine my aunt speaking or my father. But even in doing that, it's allowing me to try and think about what's the most authentic way to represent this weird thing that I've experienced as a child from parents who've been exiles and have migrated from Asia, and how specific that is to my experience. So it was about trying to capture that.
But do you find or feel that actually a lot of it's so internal, a lot of sound, that, somewhere the writing might be even more, because you're sort of writing out something, but the precision of the writing in some ways might be more sonorous than actually trying to, unless you had performed it as a musical piece or as a poem, somewhere it's very, all the voices and the sense you have of the past is very internal. As a writer, I think that even though it's very, what I would say is very sort of aural, at the same time it is very an internal sound or an internal memory of speech and sound.
Yeah, I really wanted to try and pin that down, because well, I won't spoil anything, but towards the end I talk about the pronunciation of certain words and how even that was rooted in my own internalized experience of voices and accents and sounds. And then in addition to that, how I'm experiencing things and how I experience my own voice. So not just necessarily the way I think about music, but also voices and the space around me and those silences. And I just wanted to try and capture all of that, I think.
Well, I'm interested too, because I think when our minds and our memory are so noisy, actually, there's very little. It always seems like you have to sort of say it out loud to be noise, but they're so noisy,
I spent a lot of time wondering why my parents couldn't be like other people, they couldn't sound like other people. And now I realise that it's actually it's a gift, because I spent so long thinking about that and trying to remember it, that I am able to write about it now.